Oops. Let's put this here. Would you be pissed if I told you that in some countries distilleries are allowed to color their whiskies? Well, I certainly was pissed. Hello everyone, hello malt friends, and welcome to the Whiskey Amateur class. For those of you who are watching this for the very first time, let me just give you a quick review or a quick overview teaser. What's this channel all about? So during the summer I had too much free time and I started my YouTube channel, and as the name suggests, it's for complete beginners. So in the first 4 videos I talked about essential knowledge, everything that you have to know about whiskey as a beginner. So I talked about prices, quality, how it is made, where does it come from, and so on and so forth. And in the 4th video I showed you how you should approach, how you should taste whiskey in the first place. Starting from video number 5, I started to review whiskeys, always paired with a pretty interesting topic, or I would also call them misconceptions about whiskeys. So for example, in video number 5, I reviewed a wonderful Glen Scotia expression and paired this with the ABV topic, because many people think that all of the whiskeys are bottled with 40%, but that's actually not true. Then in video 6, I reviewed a single cask Kilchoman whiskey and talked about the vatting and single cask topic. And 2 weeks ago, I reviewed the wonderful Laphroaig lore and talked about the non-age statement. So that is why is the case that sometimes you can see on the label how old the whiskey is, and why is the case that sometimes distilleries hide it, and whether this is a good or bad thing. And today, video number 8, I'm going to review a wonderful Bruichladdich, their flagship whiskey, the classic laddie. And I'm going to talk about the coloring topic. So when it comes to coloring, in Scotland and in Ireland, you are allowed to color the whiskey. Or I could also say that it's not prohibited to color the whiskey. Depends on the angle how you see this topic. And is this a bad or good thing? Well, as your intuition might tell you, this is a bad thing. So why do some distilleries do? The main idea behind this is that between the different years, between the different batches, between the different casks, it can happen that the color will be a bit different. So in one year, the whiskey is a bit darker, or in the other year, the whiskey is a bit lighter. In order not to confuse the consumers, some distilleries even out these differences, so that all of the whiskeys have in every year the same color. But by adding color to it, you essentially add something that it's not naturally part of the whiskey, because the color, the natural color, comes always and only from the cask. Everything else is just chemistry, and this coloring, this caramel or sugar coloring, I'm not sure how the specific name is, it's called E150A, and yeah, as you might have right away seen from my expression, this is not a good thing, okay? And there are some distilleries, such as for example the Bruichladdich distillery, which claim very proudly that they never add any coloring to the whiskey, and this is the right way to do. So today I'm super excited to review this whiskey because Bruichladdich is by far my favorite distillery. And why is this the case? So there are hundreds of reasons, but let me just pick you some. So the first and most important probably is that they have 3 core segments. They have 3 lines, and here I listed for you. So first you have the Bruichladdich segment or lineup, which is the unpeated or not smoky range. Then you have the Port Charlotte, which is the heavily peated segment of the distillery. And last but not least, you have the Octomore, which is the world's most heavily peated, the most heavily smoky whiskey on the globe. Of course, this thing I have to say for the whiskey geeks that this is measured in the barley. So this ppm, you would call it, this is how you measure the smokiness in the whiskey. It's actually measured in the barley. So whether it's that smoky in the glass, it's another thing. So you cannot really compare according to that, but be assured Octomore is a real beast. So they have this wonderful range. Depending on your mood, you can always pick what you want to drink. And today I'm reviewing their flagship whiskey, the Classic Laddie. And right away I have to tell you that this is not a beginner's whiskey. It's bottled with 50% ABV, which is a pretty high alcohol volume. And this is why the whiskey at first it's a little bit sharp on the nose, on the palate, also on the finish. So you really have to be patient with this whiskey when you drink it. So first of all, you have to let it sit a lot more than usually the other whiskeys that you drink, and it really benefits from adding a couple of drops of water to it. So many people do the mistake that they pour it, they smell it right away, and they taste it, and they just miss so much, you know. And this is a very complex, a very concentrated whiskey. Yeah, so let me talk about the house style. So this whiskey, Bruichladdich in general, produces extremely floral and fresh whiskeys. So you get a very nice, open, fresh, light whiskey that is also very fruity. And when it comes to fruits, I always mention apricots like a lot of apricots, or peaches, also pears, apples, honeysuckle. Then you have also very nice oaky influences. Even though the whiskey is a little bit younger, you get very nice oaky tones, oaky spiciness. And below this level, there's also some vanilla, touch of honey sweetness. Yeah, it's just a lovely whiskey. When it comes to Bruichladdich, I truly admire them for their philosophy, for their politics, because they do everything with integrity and with transparency. What this means, I already told you one. So they never ever color their whiskey. They always bottle it with a higher strength. So their core range is 50% ABV, and they have a lot of cask strength whiskeys. Third, they don't chill filter, and this is a topic that I will cover in the next session. And lastly, just give me a second. So, the age statement, sorry. Even though the Classic Laddie doesn't have an age statement, there is a barcode that you can scan, and you can check the exact cask that went into this whiskey. And they don't want to hide it. They just want to have a bit more liberty, I guess, when bottling the Classic Laddie. And this whiskey is roughly between 7 to 10 years ages. So the casks that go into this whiskey start from 7 or 8 years old. And there's also some portion that is a bit older. So you also know that. And for the other whiskeys, you can always find how old the whiskey was, and they never hide it. Yeah, so there's this transparency. Also, the second and very important thing is that when it comes to barley, they have clear views, clear politics. They said that we are only going to use Scottish barley. And you might wonder, okay, what's the big thing about it? What if I told you that many distilleries import their barley from India or from Russia, or I don't know from which country, as a commodity, and they simply just don't care about the barley itself? Yeah, Bruichladdich said that, you know what, guys? This is called Scotch for a reason. So everything that we use will be Scottish. So they really proudly use only Scottish barley, and the best comes yet. Roughly 50% of their barley is grown locally. So on the island of Islay, where the distillery is, roughly 50% of their barley comes from local farmers. They have contracts, they are building the community, and even though Islay is by no means ideal for growing barley, for harvesting, cultivating barley, they do want to have barley from the locals, and that's something that I admire. And believe me, it makes a difference. So here, for example, the Bruichladdich Islay barley is produced, distilled only from Islay barley. Also the Port Charlotte Islay barley, and Octomore always also has a specific bottling every year that is only distilled from the local barley. And yes, it does make a difference. So many distilleries or many big multinational firms claim that it doesn't matter, but if you think just intuitively, it will matter. And this is why they also talk about terroir. And terroir is basically well known in the French, not just in the French, in the wine industry. And this was among the first distilleries, if not the first distillery, which started to talk about this and put really focus on this topic. So this is also very nice. One more very important thing is that they do everything on site. So starting from the barley and harvesting up till the bottling, they do everything at the distillery. And from the 120 distilleries in Scotland, I think there is one or two more who does that, because the bigger ones always outsource it because it's just cheaper. So there are distilleries who put the whiskey into the cask, the new make spirit into the cask, and they ship their cask, I don't know, to a completely different part of the country where the warehousing is just cheaper, or they have a contractor who is doing the bottling, and so on and so forth. So Bruichladdich is really among the last distilleries that do everything from A to Z at the distillery. Yeah, this is also very nice. Coming back to the coloring again, just to talk about the topic of this review. So coloring, when you go into the shops and you buy the cheapest blend, and that has a very dark and rich color, now you will know that that color is by no means natural. So be aware, because it cannot have after 3 years. Also, you have to be conscious about this topic, because by just looking at the whiskey, if it's darker, your brain automatically starts to associate different specific aromas and specific flavors already. And that's pretty misleading, because alone from the color, you cannot judge the whiskey. You won't be able to tell, okay, since it's darker, it's going to be like this and this. This is a big misconception, okay? And you really have to consciously think about this topic. So this whiskey, for example, is fairly light, and I can tell you it's just so rich, and it has such a nice body, and this is what truly matters. So by the color, you cannot judge the whiskey at all. You might think if it's natural color, then yeah, you might guess that probably the whiskey is a bit older, or the casks were first fill, or Oloroso sherry, or I don't know. But at the end of the day, unless you taste it, you won't know it. So this is something to keep in mind, that it's not indicative. Yeah, so the quality of this whiskey is just remarkable, and this fresh floral fruity style is just something that I truly love. Also, when you have this wide variety, it's just so great. You know, they have so many expressions, you can explore so much. So I say good health, Slàinte. Let me review this. The intensity of this dram is just gorgeous. The texture everything. The higher ABV helps to deliver the flavors very nicely. It's warm, it's long, it's just great. And here is one final thing for today for the hardcore Ledi fans. I believe that the standard classic Ledi and the standard bottlings of the distillery, they benefit a lot by if you add some water to it. And I believe that this 50% ABV might be a bit too much. And the ideal drinking strength is roughly around 46%. But in case of the Islay barley, where they just use local barley, I think there the 50 ABV is just perfect. So that really helps to deliver those strong concentrated barley sugars, malty tones to your tongue. So this is something that I wanted to share, that this is my personal view on this ABV topic. So I'm really happy that they bottle it with a higher strength, because you have some space to to play around, add some water and check how it will evolve. Precisely. So great house style, great philosophy, great politics. I think this is a whiskey or a distillery that everybody has to try, even if it's not necessarily beginner's whiskey. And yes, that being said, I'm really happy to read your comments and thoughts on the distillery, and I will see you in 2 weeks with my next whiskey review. Take care. Bye bye.